It's Wednesday, March 26, 2014, and this is the Arizona Mining Review. I'm your host, Lee Allison, at the Arizona Geological Survey in Tucson. And, as we usually do in our monthly video magazine here, we have Nyal Niemuth, the head of our Economic Geology section in Phoenix, to give us an update on what's happening in Arizona mining. And Nyal, you've got some new numbers on copper production in Arizona in 2013, I hear.
Yeah, one of the things that usually happens at the end of the first quarter is a variety of the corporations start releasing their annual reports or their Form 10Ks or their discussions and analysis from Canada. And so I don't have all the figures yet, but I've got enough of them to make some comments about what went on last year. And what we've seen is that it looks like Arizona's production should be up about 140 million pounds. And we can largely attribute that to increases at Morenci, Baghdad, Sierrita, and most significantly at Pinto Valley. With the restart of the mill, we saw the production go up there about 90 million pounds.
Well, it's kind of a surprise that production's up that much with the price of copper dropping like it did.
Yeah, but I think for a lot of the producers that, like I comment, even though they're complaining, and I know now with the lower price of copper below $3, we're certainly seeing people focused on cutting costs. But I think for a lot of last year, they were still kind of wanting to take advantage of what was a relatively strong price.
Okay. So how does that compare to U.S. production overall? How well did Arizona do?
Yeah, so year over year, we were up about 8%, but we had that drop in prices you just mentioned. So I think that we'll end up seeing the value be pretty much the same, about 6.2 or so billion dollars of production. And Arizona went up quite a bit relative to the nation. The estimates so far for the U.S. are that production will be up about 4%. And so we attributed for more, significantly more of that growth that occurred. Probably what we saw is a drop in production due to that slide up at Bingham Canyon in Utah. And so this should leave Arizona with a pretty healthy percent of U.S. production. Instead of being at, 62, 66, I think this year we could be close to 69% of United States production.
Wow, that's pretty dramatic. Now, was there one of the mines that dropped in production this past year?
Yeah, surprisingly, and it wasn't a huge drop, but we've seen Safford drop about 30 million pounds, and I really didn't find anything in Freeport's Form 10K. I haven't read through the annual report yet that they really discussed or that they attributed that to.
Okay. So at this point, we don't know what that drop was, but even with that, I think you said 140 million pound increase over 2012. So kind of encouraging that that was able to offset some of the lower price and maintain the value of the copper production in Arizona.
Yeah, and everybody should remember that our discussion here is based upon some estimated production figures and a few missing figures. But the table that they should be viewing should have the full agenda, I hope.
Okay, that sounds great. Well, we'll look as you finalize those numbers. We'll get them up on the website and share those with the rest of our viewers. So, Niall, thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you next month on Arizona Mining Review.
Very good. Thanks, Lee.
All right. Well, joining us now online is Dr. Kenneth Green, who is Senior Director for Energy and Natural Resources at the Fraser Institute. And the Fraser Institute has just released their new survey of mining companies from 2013. So, Ken, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Well, great. For those of the folks who are watching who are not familiar, can you give us a little background? What is the Fraser Institute, and why do you do this survey each year?
Well, the Fraser Institute is a Canadian think tank. It's the leading Canadian think tank. And what we do is we try to determine how government policies affect the lives of Canadians for the most part. But we also have some global products which look at the question of how public policies affect people's lives around the world. And Canada is something of a mining powerhouse. And so one of the things we want to know, we started out in 1997 asking of the different jurisdictions in Canada, which ones have policies that are most attractive to mining investment, and which ones have policies that are least attractive to mining investment. So we did a survey of mining company executives who guide revenues and who guide investment decisions, and asked them on a range of 15 policy questions, does the way that a jurisdiction handles this factor attract you or would deter you from investing in that jurisdiction. And those 15 policy questions range from the predictability of environmental regulation, the transparency of government processes, the tax regime, the mineral rights regime, certainty and uncertainty about native land claims, and certainty and uncertainty about lands that will be protected, brought under protection and out of availability for mining. And so we've asked those questions year after year because our goal is to create essentially a scorecard for governments, because we know a lot of governments want mining investment. It's a very important part of the Canadian economy. It's a very important thing for Canadian mining companies, which are leaders around the world. It's a very important thing in the United States as well, not just to maintain our level of development and our level of social quality of life, but also to bring countries into a higher level of development. Mining has always played a role in doing that, mining and energy development. So we want to basically create a context in which people compete, governments compete to create the best policy environments to attract investment. A secondary purpose, and it turns out, which is not really something that we set out to do, but it turns out that mining company executives also love this report, because when they're looking to invest, it's the first thing they grab off the shelf and say, what's a good place for me to what are the jurisdictions that are working hard to attract mining investment. So it serves two audiences and basically creates a pressure for best policy in mining.
Right, and here in Arizona, we've actually been sharing it with other state regulatory and policy officials, the mining industry, and our legislators. So I think it's getting a very good receptive audience in Arizona to understand just what are the issues out there. Now, one of the report card that you talk about, I think the key index is this Policy Perception Index, which I understand is a composite of the overall policy attractiveness in the 112 jurisdictions you look at. So it's not just nations, but it's states, territories, and other subdivisions. And when I saw the numbers for this year, what jumped out to me was that Arizona jumped up quite a bit. And I think you've taken a look at that. We went up, I think, about 8 points from 28th to 20th in the world on that, and that seems like a very significant jump in my understanding.
It is. I mean, it's a significant jump. Not surprisingly, jurisdictions that either rise quickly or fall quickly tend to contact us and want to understand what happened. And so, and of course, anybody can find out the data. By the way, I should say the data for the mining survey, which I'm going to hold up here. So the data for the mining survey is available online. The survey itself is available online at the Fraser Institute. That's www.fraserinstitute.org, Fraser being spelled Fraser, named after the Fraser River in British Columbia. Arizona did move up, as you said, 8 spots in the rankings to 28th, to 20th from 28th. And it has improved over the last 5 years, between the last survey and this year, 2012 and 2013. Went up almost 12 points. So its ratings are improving on a variety of factors, and we can talk about those if you wish. But it's a good story for Arizona.
Right, and the other, I think, big index that you track here is this Best Practices Mineral Potential Index, which is takes a look more at the geologic potential under the circumstances in which the best policies possible were in place. So it really tries to be a pure mineral resource potential. And it looks like Arizona's moved up a few places on that as well.
Yes, the survey actually has multiple indices, as you pointed out. There's the Policy Perception Index, which is purely about policy. That tells a large part of the story, but certainly not all. Because when miners consider investing, they're looking at several things. They're looking at the policy world. They're also looking at the mineral potential. And so one of our sub indices is, as you said, mineral potential under best practices. We're not interested in creating a race to the bottom where it's mineral potential in the absence of any policy. We want best practice in terms of policies that protect the environment and everything else. And so we also measure that, and that changes over time because they're sort of related. The mineral potential goes up as the policies perhaps expand lands that are available for mining, or the geologic database is improved, or any number of factors. We use that index as well for yet another one, which we may talk about, which is the investment attractiveness index, which combines the policy and the mineral potential under best practices.
Right, and I was going to follow up on that one. This investment attractiveness index is a mixture of both the mineral potential and the policy perception index. So could you describe that a little bit and how that's weighted out and what that means?
Sure. Well, we ask the survey respondents to what extent they think the mineral potential is important compared to the policy perception. And over the years, that has come in very, very steadily at 60% mineral potential, 40% policy perception. And this year was extremely close. It was within decimal points. And so we used that 60-40 weighting to take the policy perception index and the mineral potential index, put them together into a one index that says, here's the attractiveness for investment in this jurisdiction based both on policy and minerals.
Okay, and so I think in some of the numbers you shared with us, it looks like Arizona has moved up from 26th to 22nd worldwide, and puts us in number 5 position in the U.S. behind Nevada, Alaska, Wyoming, and Utah, and head of about 8 or 9 other states.
Right, I have you 6th out of 13 in the U.S. You're after Wyoming, Nevada, Minnesota, Utah, and Michigan. And it's the 20th of 112 globally. The investment attractiveness, as you said, is 22nd out of 112 jurisdictions, which, that's nothing to sneeze at.
No, when you look worldwide, that's pretty significant. And the 4 or 5 states up there that rank with Arizona in that are all well known as major mining centers in the U.S. So it's not surprising that Arizona's kind of lumped in with the other major mining centers, particularly in hard rock and gold, copper, silver, those kinds of things.
One of the things we've noticed year to year is that when we have these conversations, and it's reassuring because these are after all perceptions. We're not saying that we are measuring investment, but what's reassuring to us is that year after year we come out with our numbers, and virtually everyone in those jurisdictions says, yes, this is not only this makes sense from my point of view. It's intuitively logical. These are places well known for their hospitality and interest to that mining investment. And when a jurisdiction drops, the regulators come forward to us and regularly tell us, we know why we dropped. Your factor shows us that we dropped, on this particular factor because we withdrew a whole bunch of land from availability. We know that, and yes, it dropped, and we're going to have to. If we want investment, we're going to have to figure out how to deal with that and move the needle the other direction.
Well, Ken, one of the things I saw in the report in the survey this year is that you've added a new question about how public opposition to mining is affecting the permitting and approval process for projects. And quite a few, 36% of the companies said that public opposition had been affecting permitting, with about a quarter of the respondents saying their projects had been delayed 2 to 4 years. Another 22% or so saying delayed 1 to 2 years. And the most commonly mentioned opposition is over environmental or water usage, followed by indigenous or aboriginal rights or title. I can imagine what prompted you to start tracking this, but and this is the first year you've done this, so we don't have historical data. But what prompted you to put this in, and maybe you can explain a little bit about where you think this, what's driving this.
Well, we have two challenges with the survey. There's a huge number of things we'd love to ask about. But of course, the people who complete the survey want it to be relatively brief and easy to complete. So we add one or two questions a year that we think are emergent issues. And here in Canada, we've seen quite a lot of opposition to both mining and energy development based on public opposition and native land claims and things like that. And we've seen around the world a general trend of opposition to mining. And so we wanted to ask about it. And as you pointed out, the numbers are fairly interesting. It is apparently quite a real phenomenon. Companies are being delayed and having higher levels of uncertainty as to whether or not they're going to be able to proceed on a mine based on public opposition. And while the survey itself doesn't tell us exactly why that is happening, there are several things that are fairly obvious in terms of what one can speculate about. The environmental movement has become much more active over time and continues to become more active around the world, and escalates any sort of incident with regard to mining or energy into a 24-hour, 24/7 social networking sort of attack. So the tolerance level for incidents relating to pollution incidents or anything like that, I think, is dropping because it's so much more visible than it used to be. And as countries become wealthier, as countries develop especially, people's environmental values go up, and they're willing to tolerate even less environmental impact. And to a certain extent, while I don't like to portray people as being ignorant, I do think that people have become more distant over time from the things that produce everything they use. So people live further and further away from mining. They live further away from energy production. But when you flip the light switch, it goes on, and when you pick up your phone, it works. People don't realize, they don't draw the dots to the metals and minerals that went into their phone, into the computer, into the copper wiring in the walls that moves their power. I think people have just become a little more distant from that over time, and so they're more open to arguments from NGOs and mining opponents that a particular mining endeavor is not quote not needed or not beneficial to the local people, or or is too environmentally intrusive and so on.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, Ken, I know we're running a little bit short on time here, but in some of the materials you've shared with us, along those same lines, you had a couple of diagrams where you synthesized some of the data, and one of them is uncertainty concerning which areas will be protected. And I think with your numbers, we've seen it running around 15% or so over the past few years. It looks like it's taken a drop down more like in the 12%.
That's right. It's about 12% this year. It's down from last year where it was 16%. But it has fluctuated over time. In the 2011-2012 survey, we have stopped doing the survey over the new year. So now we're just going to be within the previous year. So there's a little bit of inconsistency in the numbering. But 2010, 2011, for example, that was 20%. 7% said they would not invest because of the uncertainty about protected areas. 11% said it would be a strong deterrent to investment. And so it's down considerably from the 2010 period and 2009 as well, where it was 16%.
Okay, and another diagram here, the uncertainty concerning existing regulations. I think what caught my attention was that for the last prior 3 years, it had dropped from 11% down to 3%, and then suddenly this year it's back up to 12%, which is the highest I think you show in the last 5 years, and that seems quite dramatic.
Yes, it is, and there is, of course, annual fluctuation in these things. Part of it is internal to a jurisdiction. Part of it is relative. So in the overall indices, because we've added new jurisdictions, there's movement that can be related to adding new jurisdictions. But within the jurisdiction, you're right. There has been an increase in that in that metric deterring investment, which is uncertainty about existing regulation. That's something you could probably explain actually better than I can. Changes, this tends to relate to changes in governments and in regulatory initiatives that inject uncertainty with regard to one's ability to engage in mining. Most jurisdictions, when they see something like that, they'll be able to point to it and say, "Oh yes, that's right. These two mines, right, these regulations were changed, which made the feasibility of this mine economically infeasible," and so on and so on.
Okay. Well, Ken, to wrap it up here let me give you a chance on one last point here. In looking at the survey from this last year and comparing it to the past 15 years, is there one takeaway message that you see out of the survey back to the regulatory authorities or to the mining industry?
There is. I mean, there is really one overarching message that has carried through from 1997, and that is that mining and uncertainty really don't go well together. Because of the lengthy time horizons of investing, you're putting money essentially into the ground before you're pulling value out of the ground. And it's a long time horizon. It can be years, it can even be decades of development of a mine and production from a mine. And when the rules are changed in the middle of the game, whether that's about land access, whether it's about royalties, whether it's about taxation, whether it's about environmental regulations, these things make prospective investors very, very nervous. And so jurisdictions that maintain a very reliable, very steady state regulatory regime, and it can be quite stringent. If you look at the leaders around the world, Nordic countries lead the world in mining. So they're not exactly known for having lax environmental standards in Sweden and Finland. These can be quite stringent, but they're consistent. Right? And the companies and potential investors know that if they do their diligence, if they put in their money and they put in their time, and they obey the regulatory regime, they'll be allowed to proceed, they'll be allowed to develop the resource, they'll be allowed to recoup their costs. And so that's what the overarching lesson from the survey is, that a dependable, well-designed regime of a regulatory regime is hospitable to mining investment, and a poorly designed, uncertain regime is really quite hostile to mining investment.
All right. Wow. Ken, I think you really sent a very powerful message there, and we hope that our viewers will take heed to that. So thank you again. It was wonderful having you on the show, and thank you for the work you do on the survey. We're sharing it widely around Arizona and with our colleagues around the country. And we look forward to having you on next year and give us the results on the 2014 survey.
Well, thank you, and I hope the results next year are equally positive for Arizona, and that we have a good news story to talk about rather than a bad one.
Fantastic. Thanks again, Ken. All right. Well, next on the show, we're talking with Dr. Brigette Martini, a geologist and Vice President of Business Development for Corescan. And Brigette, welcome to the show. And first thing is, who is Corescan? And what do you do?
So Corescan was actually started in Australia. We're an Australian company based out of Perth, so our world headquarters there. But we also have offices now in Santiago, Chile. And we are an automated mineralogical core logging company. So we have designed and built a set of instruments that comes fully containerized in a standard shipping container, like a seatainer, a 20-foot seatainer. And within that seatainer, we have a fully automated mineralogical logging system, as well as supporting computing power. And we do not only photography of the core, but we are also doing hyperspectral scanning of the core, which is what allows us to get the mineralogy, the very specific high-resolution mineralogy. And in addition to that, we also are doing laser profiling of the core. And all of that is done automatedly within our systems that can be brought to your pit or to your core shed. Or we also set up regional bureaus where you can bring your core and your rock material to us in those regional facilities. So that's in a broad way what we do and who we are.
Okay. Well, I saw your system in Brisbane, Australia, about a year and a half ago during the International Geologic Congress, and it was quite striking. Both the fact that you've got it in this container and you can move it around to a site where and do the analysis right there, but also the hyperspectral logging and some of the new technology. And then I heard from you that you're looking at moving this technology into the U.S. and into Mexico, perhaps. And the possibility of providing some of these services in Arizona and the surrounding regions. So, what's going on with your plans for the U.S. and northern Mexico?
Yeah, so it's very exciting. Obviously, I'm based here in the United States. I'm the only person over here on this continent. And so, as I mentioned, we brought our labs into Chile last year, and 2014 now is the year for North America. And so we're bringing our very first lab. We've just announced a partnership with a company called GeoResolution, based out of Hermosillo, Mexico. And it's a company comprised of several geologists and engineers who've had experience both in Mexico and across the border. They include Rafael Gutierrez, Julio Palomino, and Fernando Oviedo, who some people in the Arizona community I'm sure will know. And we're going to partner with them to provide Corescan services across Mexico. But excitingly, as the lab comes into North America, it's actually going to come in through the United States. So Corescan will be incorporated here in the United States, and it's going to come through Tucson on its way to Hermosillo. So what I'm hoping is to have a few open days where people can bring material to us to have scanned, have a look at the system, see how it works. And of course, the survey, the Arizona survey, I would love to have some samples come in from them and from the university. So it's going to make a little bit of a stop in Tucson on its way down to Hermosillo. And then later in the summer, we're going to have permanent labs coming into the United States.
Wow. Well, let me first say that we will take you up on your offer
Okay.
and bring some of our cores over to the facility when it's here in Tucson and take a look at the capabilities, and that'll be exciting for us. So thank you very much. And I think you're probably aware, but Tucson's also a real center for a lot of exploration activity in northern Mexico, and we have geologists and companies that operate here, but also have a lot of exploration and development activities going on in Mexico. So I think this looks like a great opportunity. Is there any thought that you might be setting up a facility based in the U.S. or based in Arizona specifically?
So we will absolutely have a facility in the United States in 2014. It's a little bit up in the air right now of where the first system is going to go in the U.S. I will say it's probably between Nevada and Arizona at this point. I would love to see it in Tucson. I was a wildcat, so I would love to be able to come down a little bit more often. It really depends on our early adopters in North America who signs up initially to probably where it'll initially go. However, as I pointed out, it in some ways it doesn't matter as much where our offices are. These units are so mobile, so they go onto the back of a truck, they could be slung, they go on a train. Obviously, they're coming over on ship. So we foresee our labs, though they may be based in Reno or Tucson, they will move around the Western U.S. quite easily and probably frequently.
Okay. Well, we'll be talking to you off camera about all the advantages of having your operation based here in Arizona and specifically Tucson. So expect a follow-up call from us. Maybe you could take a minute or so and explain a little bit more about the hyperspectral logging you're doing, and what's different about that, and what does that mean to a geologist or to an exploration company.
Right. So the technology. So we call it hyperspectral, but a lot of people prefer to refer to it as imaging spectroscopy. And so what it is it's simple infrared spectroscopy. And many people out there watching this and people in the mining community have probably used infrared spectroscopy, but more in a handheld instrument. So an instrument that actually takes very small spot sizes, and they can walk up to an outcrop and take a spectral signature, or in the lab. And so what's different about what we're doing is that instead of it just being a simple point measurement, we're actually imaging the entire core surface. So you're actually getting not only the mineralogy, which we're using the infrared to do, But we're actually giving you an image of the core, so you actually get an entire mineral map of your core. So that shows not only the mineralogy, but the textures, the veins, the minerals filling in the fractures. And by then you're also then getting assemblages. So you're not just getting an individual, here's kaolinite, you're getting that in this 1 meter of core, by the way, there's about 100,000 spectral signatures in 1 meter of core or chips. And we're using that data then to create mineralogic assemblage maps.
Wow. So you've sent us some images, and we'll go ahead and bring those up on the screen and show our audience just the kinds of scans you're making with this. So I'm just staggered by the density of measurements.
And of course, we don't ask you to analyze that. We do that for you.
Okay, so then, all right, that was one of the follow-ups. What happens then when you turn around and give this image to a company? They're overwhelmed with just, this has got to be a vast amount of data. Can you run this on a desktop computer with your software to do the kind of analyses that we geologists would want to do with this?
So what is, I think, the technology's been around for a while, the hyperspectral. It's been around since the late 70s, this style. But what's really innovative about what Corescan has done is the actual products and the support for the processing of the data. So we don't hand you a giant hyperspectral image data cube, as they're called. We just provide you with a classification map of all of the minerals, and those are just simple JPEGs or TIFFs. Those will go into any simple software, and they're not large. The other thing that we do is, in addition to the beautiful images that we provide you, we also then compute quantitative downhole percentages of each of the minerals, as well as things like not just identification of certain mineral classes. So by the way, we do, clays, micas, carbonates, sulfates. So we don't just give you individual minerals, say chlorite, but we can also tell you chemistry of the chlorite. So we can say whether something is high magnesium versus high iron chlorite. And we give you all that data in a downhole, very, very much like an assay, a mineral assemblage log, and each individual mineral. We just announced a partnership actually at PDAC with Acquire. And so in the Acquire software suite, our Corescan data, there's actually a button that will bring the Corescan data straight into Acquire. And in that way, you can start to actually analyze statistically the mineral percentages and how they interact with, say, your grade data, your assay data.
Wow. Well, this sounds like an incredible technology, and one that's going to be of tremendous interest, I think, to the mining industry in Arizona and across the country. So we're excited to welcome you to the U.S., even if it's temporarily while you're setting up your operations down in Mexico. But getting a U.S. operation is something, and we'll share it with our viewers and with the Arizona mining community and others when you get here. So we're looking forward to seeing the operations. So thank you for joining us this morning and sharing this news. It's exciting. Any last wrap-up comments you want to make, or?
Well, I would just say that once we come, we also always do for companies who haven't worked with us before. They're interested to see what Corescan can do in their particular deposit. We always offer a free trial. And so people can send us a couple boxes, or when we come through Tucson or down in Hermosillo, you can just bring us a few boxes, maybe even a pallet, and we'll have a look for you to see what we can do. And of course, also, I'll throw out there for students as well, we always scan free data for students for their master's and PhD work. So
That's great news. We will definitely make sure that our 3 universities here in Arizona are aware of that, because you may have some ready takers on that offer.
Excellent.
Well, Brigette, thank you again. We appreciate it. It's exciting news. We look forward to seeing you in Tucson in 2014.
Absolutely. Thank you, Lee.
Take care. Thanks again for joining us on the Arizona Mining Review. Our producer-director is Mike Conway. Technical support from Ron Palmer. Our media intern from the University of Arizona is Jenna Favel. Logo and set design with Stephanie Marr. And our editor, cameraman, Jordan Maddy.